Hi, I'm Brenda Such. Welcome to another episode of COIPcast, where we talk about new, trending, or just fascinating technologies, strategies, or topics in online education. As instructional designers, we may work with faculty to build diverse and fascinating courses. One such course for us has been Drugs and Drug Control in Modern History with Dr. Joseph Spillane. Yes, you heard it correctly. Drugs and Drug Control in Modern History. So let's dive more into this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Spillane.
Thank you, Brenda. Thanks for inviting me to do this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Me too.
When we were developing this course, we were like, whoa, we're actually developing a course about drugs and drug history.
It's kind of how I felt.
They're like, you get to do this. So a little bit about our show. We have 3 segments where we talk about the past, present, and future. And we like to get to know the past and present experiences that you've had in education, especially related to the production of online courses, and any thoughts and plans that you have about teaching and learning for the future. So in our first segment, Digital Origin Story, or DOS, could you please share how you became involved in online education?
That's a great question. So I've been doing education, for a long time. I've been here at the University of Florida since 1995.
Okay.
So I've taught a lot of classes. I've taught a lot of students. When UF Online in particular started, I was Associate Dean for Student Affairs in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And so part of my job became figuring out kind of the development of online programs that our college was offering, and also, broadly speaking, thinking about how to support online students through academic advising and other kinds of student support. But that whole time that I was doing that job, I kind of always imagined that I would eventually have my chance to actually teach online. But that would have to wait until I had concluded my time as associate dean. But honestly, as soon as I did, for me, this was a high priority to try and get a course developed, see what it was like, and then of course, actually deliver it, see what the student response was like. So my connection really started with thinking about online programs broadly from an administrative point of view, but very much being on the sidelines in terms of the actual teaching. So it's taken a while to get around to the teaching part, but I finally did.
And getting to know you, I know you've had some experience obviously in administration, but have you always been an administrator, or were you obviously in history?
I mean, I've been I've been a professor in both criminology and history at the University of Florida for a long time, and right now primarily in history. But oh goodness, no! I mean, administration was an interesting detour. It allowed me to do some really cool things in terms of helping programmatic development, big picture. But I've been teaching for far longer, and ultimately that's who I am. It's my primary identity for sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good to hear, because then that's actually a nice segue to our next segment, Bits and Bytes, where we discuss tidbits or technical issues related to course production. So with that teacher background, when putting together the course Drugs and Drug Control in Modern History, what was your experience? What were some of the challenges you encountered? How did it come to fruition or be manifested?
That's a really interesting question. So, obviously I knew what I wanted to do broadly. I mean, I understood that I want to teach a course on drugs and drug control in modern history. Beyond that, I really had no idea.
Actually, can I pause you there?
Sure.
So how does one even get interested and be able to be a subject matter expert in that area?
That is a long story, maybe a little bit longer than we have time for. But I'm a historian by training.
Yes.
That's what my degrees are in, and that's my disciplinary perspective. But the subject of drugs, historically has always really fascinated me.
Mhm.
And so my research has long been engaged with questions of where we've come from in terms of drug problems and the way in which we encounter drugs in the world. I mean, these things all have really deep, long histories to them.
Mhm.
I find that really interesting as a historical researcher to try and dig into that because I think it really helps us understand the modern day world
Mhm.
and all of the kind of issues and challenges that come along with drugs and drug problems. I think it really helps us understand those things if we take some historical perspective.
Mhm.
For lack of a better way of putting it, figure out how we got here, right?
Mhm.
And so for me as a research challenge, history of drugs has always just been top of the list for me as something that's interesting. And I've written about it a lot and I've published a lot. So a course like this, it's a big course in many ways. Just think about the title, right? We cover the whole world, we cover all of modern
Mhm.
history.
Mhm.
So in terms of time and space, we travel a lot in a class like this. And in some ways I actually feel like it would have been very hard for me to do a course like this early on in my career. So I don't think I knew enough at that point. It was the idea behind the course was ambitious. And for me, it almost felt like an opportunity to take, more than a quarter century of work in this field and try and bring it all together, and bring together the work of a lot of people that I know and whose work I really respect and kind of synthesize all of that in a single course for students. So I guess if I could kind of get to the root of why this course, why that
Mhm.
idea, it
Right.
really boiled down to an opportunity to kind of look back on everything I've done as a researcher and as a writer for so many years. And can I put that all together in a course, right? Something that really helps students make sense of this big picture that we're looking at.
Mhm. And I guess what is driving you? I guess what is the ultimate goal? I don't want to put that kind of pressure of ultimate goal, but I think you're touching upon something that any instructor
Yeah.
who's passionate about a course touches upon, where you're teaching about something that's interesting. But what do you hope that your students take away from it?
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it because there are lots of bits and pieces of this course that are just sort of interesting, like in the trivia sort of way. And that's okay. Like I'm actually totally happy if students who take the course get to like throw this stuff out, in different conversations like, "Hey, did you know that?" And there's lots of stuff in there that's interesting, just kind of interesting facts and stories and trivia, but that's not really the point of the course. And I think the point of the course is for students who understand drugs, drug control as major issues in the contemporary world, for those students to be able to bring a historical way of thinking
Mm.
to those issues. So, for example, that's one reason why the final project of the course is essentially a policy memo that they write on any topic they can come up with, but a policy memo from a historian's point of view. In other words, they have to address a current issue, but they have to do it by talking about the lessons and the concepts that we can bring from history
Mhm.
to it. And I think the success of the course, beyond just, gee, that's kind of cool, or that's weird, or that's interesting,
Right, right, right.
I think the success of the course is really encouraging students to cultivate that mindset of a historian and to understand the way historical analysis works.
Mhm.
And then if they can do that and apply it
Mhm.
to the present day, then I think we've got there.
Mhm.
That's what we're going for.
Was there any challenges or maybe ease of the online environment to
Well,
support that kind of initiative?
the biggest challenge was my own really huge level of ignorance, right? I'm really serious about this. Like, I understood, how do we build online programs? I understood about, student support, things like that. But what I knew about actually developing an online course was very little,
Mm.
right? So kind of the biggest obstacle, um, getting the course up and running was me,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know much.
Mm.
And that's where, if I'm being honest, right, the team of people with whom I got to work, and especially my course developer,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what made all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it was a combination of everything that they knew, plus me being willing to admit how much I didn't know, which
Which
really
is a
helps.
major first step. It is.
The first step is admitting your own
Admitting
ignorance.
that you don't know. Yes.
Well, it's true, and I think the other thing, really, if to be perfectly honest, the course development process is challenging, to say the least, right? Because I think when you've been a classroom instructor like I have for so many years, you kind of fall into certain habits and certain behaviors that you do without really kind of thinking much about them anymore, because it's just kind of how you do it.
Right. Could you give an example of maybe something that you've been doing for X amount of years, but when you switched to online, you had to really rethink about that?
I think it's less an example than a broad concept,
Okay.
right? Which is, in the online space, you really have to kind of think about and question everything you're doing. So for example, you drill down pretty hard on the student learning outcomes that you want to achieve, not just broadly for the course, right, but literally for every week of the class, every module of the course, right? What do I want my students to really accomplish? And you think about that much more explicitly than you do sometimes with classroom instruction. But then once you've got those student learning outcomes, and you know this, right? But once you've got those, then things either have to contribute to those or you get rid of them.
And that was that a little hard?
Of course it's hard. Because
Child, you need to go.
there are lots of things that you like.
Right.
Lots of readings that you always thought were kind of cool. And then when you dig down, you realize, wait a second, this isn't actually helping advance the cause here. Or even just thinking about lectures and trying to make them, economical, to the point, but also really speaking directly to what you want students to learn. And so for me, that process of interrogating everything that you do was tough, right? That took a lot of work. It took a lot of reflection time. Carly Vogelsang, my course developer, was pretty ruthless in a super nice way.
She is very, very nice.
Has quickly had very nice way, but really ruthless about saying, all right, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Right? What are we trying to accomplish?
Right.
And so by far the biggest challenge was just how kind of active you had to be in thinking about your teaching, every bit of it. What words do you want in your lecture? What images do you want to go with it? What do you want them to read? And I think that process of questioning everything was more work than I even imagined it would be. And I expected it to be a lot of work.
So that even extra. And I think that is very brave and courageous to, I'm not trying to brown nose you here, but I think it is courageous in any situation where we do have to step back and be honest.
Yeah.
To be, okay, well, I have to do this thing. Let me kind of think about things in a different light. And then, oh, this thing that I really liked doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And I need to be okay with that.
I think that's absolutely right. That's right. I think, whatever bravery it takes to say, I don't know what I'm doing, at the outset, but also, right, a certain commitment to rethinking how you've done things in the past. And if I'm, being really candid about it,
Sure.
I think that experience has improved my classroom instruction too, because I think you fall into some habits in the classroom that aren't always the best. And so I think the process of course development in the online space, I think has, helped me think more about what I do in person.
And then the topic of drugs, drug control, and modern history, did the topic itself have any challenges as you were producing? I mean, it may not, because it's a process that should fit any kind of topic, but.
Well, actually, I mean, I think it does, actually. So to me, the biggest challenge with a topic like drugs and drug control is that it's super multidimensional, right? So there are elements of the course when we're talking, for example, about the global spread of coffee, right, in the 1600s.
That's right, coffee is a drug. I forgot about that.
I hate to break it to you, but we're talking about
coffee.
all kinds of psychoactive substances, right?
Sure.
So there are times in a course like this where the topics are kind of fun and, but then there are also times when the topics are really not fun at all, right? And when we're talking, for example, about history and connecting it to the opioid crisis in the United States and the issue with fentanyl, for example. So the topics are multidimensional. Some of them are kind of fun, some of them are super serious. And then the biggest challenge, right, is the way that intersects with the students themselves. So one of the things that I've long understood when I teach a subject like this is that my students are going to come from really different perspectives on this, right? And so in general, over the years, I'm not talking specifically about my students this semester, but in general, right, you're going to find that you have students in the course who have experienced real, family tragedy from substance abuse. You're going to have students whose friends may have struggled. You're going to have students who maybe want to go into drug enforcement. They're thinking about it from that perspective. But then you're also going to have students who may be, recreational users themselves, right? And it seems like a cool thing or a fun thing. And the challenge, I think, as an instructor is really being upfront with your students in saying, you're coming at this from all different perspectives, right? And when we say the word drugs, right, for one student, the association might be, sort of positive or fun, and they think about partying. For another student, you say the word drugs, and it might have this really awful association in their mind.
Right.
And what I've tried to do with this course, right, is to make sure that we all kind of introduce each other, right up front, so that we know from the outset that we're coming from different places.
No, that is something that, it is nice to joke that, wow, you're teaching a drugs course, but it is sobering to realize that, and also, here's that word again, brave, of the students to even venture into this course, even if it's not necessarily a super positive thing to them.
Yeah, I mean, when you teach drugs and drug control, right? So people will kind of kid around about, oh, well, students are going to love that, and I mean, sure, like there's built-in interest when you have
Right,
that
right,
topic.
right.
And that's great, because it's a great way to get kind of students into it. But right, I mean, my hope is wherever students come from at the starting point,
Mhm.
right? Whether the word drugs makes them sad or angry or, happy, I don't know. Um,
Curious.
or curious,
Right,
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 right. That's
right,
a great word too. Whatever their kind of reaction in week 1 is, right? By week 15, they've all learned a lot,
right,
right?
right.
And maybe now they have maybe a little bit more of a multidimensional perspective on things. And
Mhm.
I think if we get there, and I feel like we do,
Mhm.
I think if we get there, that's kind of cool. That would be a real accomplishment for the course.
Good, good. Well, speaking of the course, we'll go into our third segment then,
Okay.
which is called Tech Forward. So, now that you've been involved with materials related to the course, you taught the course online.
Mhm.
What are some future iterations of it? What's next for the course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that I've been happiest about is the quality of the work that my students have done. It's been it's been really cool to see, right? When I've
Like
asked them,
papers or
right,
discussions
that's
or
so when I've asked them to write short response papers to the course materials, they've been great. They really show insight and interesting perspective, and I've really been kind of humbled by how good
mm,
that's been.
mhm.
And again, I think that's design. I feel like my being led into the land of of design has helped me because I think the work I get back has been really good, and then the discussions that they've
Mhm.
had with each other, because a big part of the course
Mhm.
are kind of recurring discussions they'll have amongst
Mhm.
themselves in small groups on the subjects that we're talking about at that particular moment. And I think the discussions have been really good. I think students, you never really know, right?
Mhm.
If they're
Mhm.
just going to say what they say, somebody else says what they say, and it's kind of
That sounds
sequential.
great. Right,
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 right.
right.
Yeah, really good. And instead, I'm actually seeing people really react, and
Mhm.
really respond in constructive ways, in positive ways, right? There hasn't been any issues with kind of negativity,
Mhm. Mhm.
but the responses are real.
Mhm.
You can tell that they're reading what other people are writing,
Mhm.
and then they're kind of feeding back on that. And I wasn't sure,
Right,
what to expect,
right.
but that's been great. So I feel really good about where the course is.
Okay.
I don't anticipate
Too many
major
changes.
changes,
Right,
honestly,
right.
because those have been pretty good.
That's good. Now, in your experience with the course, right, we're going to try another iteration, not too many changes, but is there any technology that you feel like that if it was in existence or would be in existence might be an interesting experience for your students?
Right. So there are I in part because this was, I'm dipping my toe in the water, so to speak.
Sure.
The technology, um I mean, we were doing a lot in the course, but the structure of it
Sure.
was, I don't know if you want to use the word conventional. I mean, it's working, so I'm happy
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, yeah.
But it's discussions in kind of a very traditional sense. Um, it's kind of those response
Mhm.
essays that are pretty conventional.
Sure.
It wouldn't shock anybody. So I think if as we move forward,
Mhm.
I what we're going to do in the course, maybe not in the next iteration
Of
per
course.
se,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
can tell you this: what we're going to do in the course, um, in terms of kind of pushing the envelope a bit, really two things, right? One, it's a history course,
Mhm.
so they're working with documents,
Mhm.
right? Historical documents.
Mhm.
And so I very much think that we will be doing more than we did this time
Mhm.
of actually getting them to work together to kind of dig
Oh,
through a
okay.
document,
Okay.
kind of annotated, commenting on it. We did a little bit of that.
Sure.
And it went well. And so, so we'll do more of
That could be
that.
a stepping stone to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I really, I'm pretty convinced we're going to do, possibly in the next iteration of the course, if I'm brave enough, is
you said it, everyone. I'm just kidding.
yeah, no, you're listening. So this is the final project at the moment is more of a conventional paper.
Okay.
But what I'd really love to do is kind of move out of that conventional format and encourage them to choose the modality of their final project, right? Whether they want to build out a website, make a short film, those sorts of things. Because I in some ways, everybody having to do the paper, there's some constraints there.
Right.
I feel like I'm going to unleash a little more creative energy
Sure.
if I give them maybe some different options. And so I think that would be the other area that we would kind of push forward in.
Well, that's interesting that you brought that up, because I feel like from a historic, conservative, even historians, I know you're about to write a book too. Writing is key. And so, but with this course, I appreciate that even though it is a trade or skill that historians or someone in a history course would expect someone, you're open to, hey, maybe not all my students are going to be historians. We do have papers. Let's also try something else too.
Well, you're exactly right about that. But it's also true, right? That even kind of professional historians like myself, right, in the modern moment, right, we present our work in a lot of different ways, right? There are public facing aspects of what we do and how we present our work, right, that don't have to be the traditional kind of journal article or book. And so I feel like if we're doing that in the profession, then the truth is, even if a student is going to be a historian, and I get that most of them aren't, but even if they are, honestly,
that's true.
It's probably good to start thinking about different modes of presenting what you know. So that would be, I think, the biggest thing moving forward is maybe reimagining the culminating project for the course.
That's good. We talked a lot in a short amount of time. We went from your past to your present to the future. Is there anything else that we might not have spoken about that you're like, one more thing, Brenda?
No, I mean, I think anybody who's listening to this, who's in the position of thinking, okay, is this a space that I want to get into, right? Will probably at this point have heard me say how challenging that was. And so
it's not for the faint of heart, everyone.
Right. I think it's important for me to add, kind of as a concluding note, that for every bit as challenging as it was equally rewarding. And it has turned me into something of a proselytizer for online education. And I would love, for example, to influence more of my colleagues to do this, because it is harder than anything they'll have done in a while in the teaching space. It's also, I think, more rewarding,
that's encouraging.
Unexpectedly rewarding than anything they've done.
That's encouraging. That's really encouraging. Well, thank you, Dr. Spillane, for joining us. Thank you for talking to us, not just about such an exciting topic, but also your personal experiences. Thank you, listeners, and anyone watching, for your time with us. Until next time.